like either.
Before we do break, I want to bring up Kirk Schulz at Washington State. Pat Chun took the job with rival Washington. Kirk Schulz has been under a lot of pressure. Some of it, by the way, that helped create because of presidents and Commissioner Kleofkoff or whatever, when the Pac-12 eventually just evaporated, other than Oregon State and Washington State. But Pat Chun taking the job as the AD at Washington State, to take the job at Washington, because that became open because Troy Dannon is now at Nebraska, he has just gone scorched earth on Pat Chun. Do you guys have any problem with Pat Chun going from Washington State with all of what they're going through to take the job at a place that is now a part of the Big Ten, as stable as they've ever been before? Is that something that would some people have said no to that? Maybe. But, I mean, he is going scorched earth on Pat Chun taking that job. So if it had been Minnesota, Iowa, whoever, I would have understood it. But what in the holy all, whatever he said, he didn't want to be quoted, but it basically, you're blanking kidding me.
Well, I mean, like, yes, I know it stings, but I mean, the reality of the situation is what it is. And, you know, are you like, it's not like players haven't played for the Cowboys and Eagles, or, you know, the transfer portal exists and, you know, play like Jabbar Muhammad has played for Oregon and Washington and Oregon. Like, that would never happen before, ever. So for an AD to go, coaches, Kalani Sitake went to BYU, coached at Utah, coaches at BYU. Like, I get it, like, that you're upset and that it's going to be hard to get another AD in there that it's of Pat Chun's stature, given the tumultuous future that Washington State has. But, dude, I mean, like, if it was you, if Washington called up and needed a president, would you say no? I don't know if he would.
There's a partial quote, and I read as much as I could on it, where he said, I don't plan on leaving until we get this thing righted. I don't know how many more years I have of this, which to me was like he could leave in a year. I mean, what if he just goes? Are they going to have it fixed in a year? Maybe. But I get the frustration. I get you could be very angry, but to go and out and say it, I don't understand what that does. I don't know if Pat Chun did anything wrong. Yes, it's a rival. Yes, hard times in Wazoo. But that seemed to me as if Kirk Schulz is taking out all of the frustration, of which part of it has to be on his shoulders too, and slamming it on Pat Chun.
Yeah, look, how many, not even in sports, like how many times do you get an offer from a competing firm in whatever job you do and take it because it's more money and a more stable future? It has nothing to do with the way that you feel or about anybody there. You got to look out for you. And if you want to be the AD at Washington because it's a better job for you, then go be the AD at Washington. Like, it, to me, like, okay, Kirk Schulz better stay there for a good long while and not go take another job if somebody calls him up. And maybe they won't now because he's been so publicly
what's the appeal at this point? Right?
Yeah, I don't know what the appeal of Kirk Schulz is, but yeah, I don't know. I like. It's just weird that you would, not just keep it, buttoned up a little bit.
I don't know. I think it's just mounting frustrations. Probably You lost your basketball coach. You lost your football coach. You won your lawsuit. I mean, settled it, and that was obviously good news. But, now your athletic director leaves, and so there's another thing. And in the midst of the craziest athletic time that I'm aware of, at least in that school's history. So, yeah, I think just maybe frustrations boiling over, and I don't know what kind of relationship did he have with Pat Chun.
Yeah.
We don't know what they talked about behind the scenes. We don't know.
He said they talked every day for 6 years. Now, again, it looks
but
like
I mean more like we don't know what they said to each
No.
other. Like we don't know if Pat Chun one day was like, I'm going to be here and fight through this to the very end with you guys, and then he turns around and takes the job. And if that's the case, I could understand more. But not being privy to those conversations, just sounds like a guy who's a bit fed up probably from just the hurdles that keep getting thrown in their way up in Pullman, and is just a little bit, I don't know, sounds like angry, and the word that he used, disappointed. So could he have handled that better or more professional? Certainly, but I can also see where you're not exactly in the most professional mindset now as far as just, one thing after the other. And again, it might have been a bit more personal because it's a guy he talked to every single day and thought was going to be along for the ride for settling this thing and getting it squared up and where it needs to be moving forward. And now he's gone too. So, yeah, definitely frustration boiling over, it seems like.
All right, the retired stockbroker, thank you for the super chat. Good luck to Houston this weekend. Roger Dodger, he's just jumping off a sinking boat.
I mean, that's obviously, what probably most people are going to think that aren't, Washington State fans or those that want to sympathize with them. I mean, I certainly do to an extent. I also know that these things, teams moving conferences, teams taking a hit, coaches leaving, that's all part of it. And I'm seeing kind of the same reactions I see for every other time a coach leaves. Like, oh, my God, I thought you were going to be here for 25 years. I can't believe you're leaving us. It's like, I don't know. I just think that's part of the deal. And, Washington State's in a position where if you're a coach and you got a better opportunity that's more secure and it's more of a long-term bet, then, just like players or just like Ren Baker's talking about, you're going to do what you got to do for yourself. And you don't owe Washington State necessarily anything. But, again, I don't know all the ins and outs there, but there's obviously some frustration. And Pat Chun went and took a really good job. So we'll see what Washington State can now do as far as finding an athletic director.
UW fan Jim is a Huskies fan. I'm pulling for WSU, but they are really blaming us for all of their problems. Yes, we did, by the way. S. Michael DeHart, we didn't mention it's official on Pat Kelsey. We actually spoke about him taking the job at Louisville, but now it is official. Thank you for letting us know that. And then
he's right. Like, Washington doesn't have to save them. Oregon doesn't have to save them. He does the same thing as, like, remember, like, a couple weeks ago when there was who was it that was, like, blaming the Big 12 for why they don't have a conference? It's like, why? It's not anybody's job to throw you a life raft. Like, I'm sorry, but guess what? You had a guy in the meeting rooms negotiating the deal that never came to fruition until it was far too late, that led directly to the dissolution of the conference. Not Brett Yormark calling Arizona, not the Big Ten calling, School X or whatever. It was a situation where they had an abundance of time, and there were outside pressures that created a little sense of urgency, but they were the ones, time and time again, when people were raising the alarms of, oh, it's just BS, and they had their little, little pundits of, oh, it's just people making up stuff, and it's just clickbait, or it's all lies, and the Pac-12's fine, the Pac-12's never going to die, and they believe their own stuff is basically what happened.
He was one of the most vocal
exactly right.
at propping up the conference, maybe out of hope, or maybe he thought, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, like and to an extent, his own arrogance bit him in the ass. I mean, for lack of a better term. And so I don't like all of the – I mean, I understand it, and especially from fans. That's what fans do. But I think this whole pointing the finger of like, oh, it's Washington's fault. It's the Big 12's fault. It's Oregon's fault. It's like it's a little bit of everybody's fault, but it's also your fault as much as anybody's, if not more, because your job is to handle your school. It's not Oregon's job to take care of Washington State.
Yeah, well, and – look, you mentioned the TV deal. I mean, I think our early position was like, they've got to get a TV deal done, right? They've got to get a TV deal done. It makes sense.
That's all we said.
And then initially, as it got longer and longer, it's been like, well, how, like, is Brett Yormark just that good of a negotiator that he got his done? And then the Pac-12, yes, but the Pac-12 didn't go, okay, what did you give them? Can you give us, like, $50 more just so I can get a win here?
Remember there was a study that said they were going to get $50 million, and they bid it. They chewed on it, and thought it was legitimate.
Here's what George Kliavkoff should have known. When he walked in the room and said $50 million, and they all said no. And then they gave him an offer, and then he said $50 million, and then they said, okay, you're not getting how this works here. You give us an offer, we give you an offer, then you come back down, and then we find a middle ground of everybody's happy. That's how this works. And he was like, well, we've got a guy that wrote a report that's not anything to do with this. He's just a professor. He doesn't work in the field. But he says that we're worth $50 million, and that's what we want. And then they said, well, you probably need to go talk to that guy because he's wrong. And he said, no, we don't think he is. And then you're like, at the end, like Apple,
you are where you are now.
Apple says if you sell enough candy bars, you'll get enough, and then that was it. Like
like when I was in Pop Warner football, those little boxes at UW gym. I feel for them, but they are in a bad place, and we are the evil X that kept them. That kept the house. And
you're the rival anyway, so they already don't like you and they hate you, and so it's just even more reason. And look, I'm not saying all this to dog on the Cougars, not by any means. I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes from, and it's boiled over maybe in the case of Kirk Schulz after now losing Pat Chun. And I do think that sometimes with the fans, at least, there's a little bit too much finger pointing at other conferences, other people that aren't the people who were directly involved in the decision-making that led you to where you are. The actual decision-makers that got it wrong are at fault more so than Brett Yormark is at fault for basically waiting patiently for you to screw up. And that's, in one part of this, exactly what happened was they played the waiting game and waited for a misstep and for people to get a little bit nervous. And we saw what happened with Colorado, and then the rest followed. After that, ultimately, when the Big Ten came calling for Oregon and Washington. So, there's plenty of blame game to go around. It's an awful position, and I'm, at least glad for them that they've got options as far as the financial side of things. They could have been in a way worse position, and they've got a 2-year period to, go with the Mountain West in football, see what that looks like, figure out. I know they've figured out the other sports as well for the most part, and so let's just see what that looks like and see where they end up on the other side of it. But I understand that it's a bit more than just your typical concern, because this really is a feeling of, like, are we on now the outside looking in, like, permanently? Like, did we just get kicked out of the club, just us two, and everybody else gets to stay in except for us? And that doesn't make a lot of sense in anybody's heads probably, and that hurts to see it all just go from what you've known forever and ever to all of a sudden you're not in the same conference really, name only, and it's just you and one other school, and it's in a completely uncertain future. So it's a weird time and a tough time.
You only have about 2 years of revenue flow, as you said earlier in the week, Paul, to kind of keep you afloat. Chung got handed a bag of money, and he took it from Adam Vulture. Thank you very much. Chun is an Ohio State alum, he goes, I think.
Yeah.
So he's not a Cougar legacy or anything like that. If Big 12 ADs and coaches jump ship to the SEC or Big 10, I wouldn't blame them.
I'm expecting it. I mean, look, I'm sitting there listening to Ren Baker going, he's great for West Virginia, but I'm not going to be surprised if somebody else comes calling. We know with Mac Rhodes, I mean, there's been plenty of schools that have been interested in, if he were to have taken, a USC job, for example, or a whatever job, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be like, I get it. Yep. Like, I absolutely would get it. I'm not going to, cry over spilt milk. I would totally understand it. If he were to go to TCU, that would be a different story. That'd be one where you'd be like, dude, what in the hell?
Ren Baker went to Pittsburgh.
Or when Baker went to Pittsburgh, like that, you go like, okay, wait a second. But if he's going to, like, Ohio State, I mean, sorry, ears. But
when the Missouri job opened up,
right.
He had been there before. It wasn't a great experience. But at the same time, it would not have surprised me.
Yeah,
but,
and again, nothing against the Wazoo or the OSU folks. I get it, man, and I don't envy that position whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, we all do what is the best for ourselves. That's what these conferences are doing. That's what these schools are doing, and that's what Pat Chun decided to do. And many others have made choices that are for the betterment of their lives or their careers. And so that's what I look at it as. But, who knows behind the scenes and on the Cougar message boards what the talk is about what was said, or, what the feelings are really like behind the scenes. So without knowing that, just based on what we know, it's just part of college sports is guys moving on to other gigs, and it's just unfortunate timing.
By the way, Astros and Yankees, one